Hey, welcome guys. What's going on? This is your boy Rico here. The one and only Nike Travel here.
Let's overdub that onto the other part.
Onto the other part, right? And make that happen. That's actually pretty nice. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you all back to another episode of 18th Avenue Podcast, man. And today I'm here with
Mikey Travels. You can call me Mikey B or just Mike.
Mikey B.
Mikey B.
Mikey
Last
B.
Initial.
You already know. Rico B over here.
Yeah. And Mikey B also stems into Mikey Beats.
This is hot. This is hot. So if this is your first time tuning into this podcast, this is 18th Avenue Podcast, and we talk about culture, people, and their stories. And today, Mikey, of course, you are a photographer.
That's correct.
Now, what type of photographer would you say you are?
Tough to classify. I'd probably put it more into the landscape, a little
Okay.
bit of abstract, I guess.
Okay.
You know, it's definitely outside of portraiture. You know, I do that on the side a little bit, but I
Right.
definitely more like my scenes, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
try to build a mood sort of thing.
Pretty awesome. You know what? And that's actually how we met
Yeah,
a few years ago.
it is. Yeah.
That's how we met
we were
because
on the hill there.
what's that hill called?
Scotsman's Hill.
Oh.
It's actually not too far from here, just like over
No,
there.
it's not actually. It's funny.
Yeah.
I used to think it was so far
Yeah,
until I started driving around in this neighborhood, and I'm like, oh, it's right there.
yeah.
It just comes to show Calgary is such a perfect circle.
Oh, there's so many like vista points too. You know, all those hills you can just get up there and get great vantage points all the time, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, Mikey, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town called Clavet, just outside of Saskatoon in Saskatchewan.
Clavet.
Yeah.
Clavet.
Yeah. Clavet. Clavet.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I was thinking Corvette when you said.
Corvette. Yeah. Nice car, but
Have you ever?
I wouldn't call that town a Corvette.
That's pretty awesome. So what was growing up in Clavet like?
It was, it was quaint. It was a small town. There was probably 600 people in the town. I went to the same school from K to 12. There was probably only about 600 and some kids in the school because they came from surrounding areas as well, outside of the town. So, but it was good. It was peaceful. Very calm, quiet. So,
Okay.
And this gravel roads.
Yeah. Well, it's funny we're talking about small town because I grew up in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
So I can understand. Now, what would you say the population is there
In Clavet?
in Clavet? Yeah.
I mean, now it's probably pushing more like 700-800, but yeah, back then it was 600.
Really? Eh?
Roughly. Yeah, it was small. I think we
700-800.
Yeah. Yeah, there was only, I think, 3 streets and like 2 avenues. It was pretty small.
Yeah.
But I know they've expanded since I left. I left when I was 17, so
Okay.
that would have been 05.
Yeah, I think St. John's itself was 100,000 at one time. I'm not sure what it is now, and I don't want to put out the wrong quote over there.
Yeah. I mean, it was nice because like it was still close enough to Saskatoon.
Okay.
Like it was only a 10-minute drive to Saskatoon.
Okay.
So if we needed anything, the city was right there, right?
Cool. So when did you move here, Calgary?
I moved here in 2015. I actually came out here to go to SAIT, to go to school. I was taking civil engineering, and my initial plan was to come out here, do my 2 years, and then I was going to go back and work in Saskatoon. But after spending 2 years in Calgary, I really liked it, and I met some good friends, and I was just like, why go back? I'm just going to stick around, and I've been here since.
You've been here since, like the rest of us, eh?
Yeah.
Just chilling, hanging out,
Yeah,
taking it in, sucking it in.
We always have a choice.
So you've been here for how many years exactly?
5.5.
Oh, so that's That's not very.
Yeah, no, I'm still kind of new to Calgary.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
know
We've
the
been there
city
for
well,
about
but
the same amount of time. So when I met you a few years back, it was you were probably into your second year or
yeah,
your
I
year
was
and
real fresh. And
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
I was just beginning on the whole photography train too.
Right,
Like,
right.
I hadn't even really been doing that much. I
Right.
started doing that while I was here.
Right.
So back in Saskatoon, I mean, we didn't really have the nice views and things that Calgary has to offer, so there wasn't really a lot of opportunity for photography and what I like shooting. Right?
Absolutely.
So it wasn't until I got here. I actually kind of started from traveling too. You know, I came to Calgary, and then I went on my first road trip to the States down to Denver.
Right, right.
And my idea was, oh, I haven't. A lot of my friends aren't going to be able to see this, you know. So maybe I should take some pictures so that my friends can see Denver, right? And then after that, I just realized that I like taking pictures of things and places and stuff like that. So then I just started taking pictures back home.
What was the coolest thing that you saw on that trip, or the coolest thing that you experienced on that trip that could never slip your mind?
For the very first trip, the Denver one there,
Mm-hmm.
I think what really stands out was the downtown core. Because the way the city was set up, it reminds me a lot of Calgary. You know, it's got that outer ring road and it's got a central core kind of thing. But the difference is that all of their sports stadiums are downtown. They've got their football stadium, their baseball stadium, their hockey rink, all there. And then they've also got an amusement park, kind of like a Six Flags, just right there in the downtown. And it's like also along a river, so it was really nice. And it was calm, you know, like for being a big city, 3.5 million or so people there. You know, it was very friendly. You know, I was actually surprised because, you know, I grew up in Canada. And you always see on the media, you know, stigmatisms about the States, and you're always a little worried, oh man, you know, I'm going to get shot if I go down there. But no, I went down there. The people were great, super friendly. So yeah, I just had a really great time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make it an annual thing. So every year I wanted to go back to the States and I'd go somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? It's funny you mentioned the stigma and everything. I tell you what happened to me.
Okay.
Because my family, you know, come to Canada in 97. And so we're living in Newfoundland for the longest time. I mean, I go to junior high, elementary, high school there and everything. So
Yeah.
when I finished the very first time, I would leave the island, right, to go to Montreal. I'm in Montreal, and I would never forget this experience for as long as I live. And I'm in Montreal, and we go to this club. It's called Angel, this nightclub. And when we get there, it's a black nightclub. So when we get there, you know, I'm there with like Asian people, white people, you know,
Yeah, diverse group.
and that was the first time I've seen since leaving Africa. It was the first time I was able to see so many black people in one place at the same time. It was a tremendous shock to me, right? And the crazy thing about it was that all I could think of was all the shit I heard on the news, all the shit I seen in the movies.
All the horror
I
stories.
started thinking about Boys in the Hood, you know how the drive-by. So literally the whole time I'm standing there, I'm freaking in my mind, I'm calculating, okay, there's going to be a drive-by now in a moment, right? Like legit.
Yeah,
I would.
where's my escape
Where is
point?
my escape? So I'm hiding behind people that are much bigger than me. I was like, yo, if it's a drive-by, they get hit first.
Yeah.
Dude, it was messed up. So it's funny. But isn't that interesting, though, is that we can literally grow up in the city, spend our entire life here, never leave, never travel. And all we know is things we heard from our parents, things from the news. Like, how crazy you think that is?
It's pretty crazy because, like, you know, a lot of the times too, the media will only report those big stories, those crazy moments,
Right.
you know, so they might be blowing things out of proportion a little
Right.
bit, right? Because all you see is the bad. You know, they don't tend to report on a lot of the good stuff.
Right.
It's always just the negative. So you just get a negative thought of like, holy crap, that place is crazy. Like people are getting shot up,
Right.
and all this, and it makes you a little worried to visit.
Oh,
it, right?
absolutely.
But then you actually go to this place and you're like, well, what was all that fuss about? This is like the greatest little spot. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, you must be super excited that you were able to break that barrier because, you know, coming from Saskatoon, which is a small town, much like, you know, St. John's is, right? So coming from there, I mean, you can only think about your friends and perhaps even their own experiences, just not having to leave. They're probably thinking, looking at your images, like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah. Why is he going?
Have they ever just approached you and be like, dude, what are you doing?
We always have a choice.
Oh,
say
they're
like
just like,
that.
yo, dude, that's super cool.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think so.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
more people are like, wow, you got to go there. That's really neat. You know, like it's more of like I think a little bit that they would like to, but a lot of people find it. They always think that it's a really big cash constraint to travel, but there's ways to do it on a budget that you can get around. Like when I go traveling, I drive, so it's I'm not paying for flights or plane tickets or anything like
Gotcha.
that. I usually do it during the
Right.
summertime so I can go
Right.
camping. So you can find campsites that are either free or inexpensive, right? You can camp along the way. I don't often pay for accommodation unless I really feel like having a hotel room
Okay.
for a night kind of thing. But yeah, I tend to travel light, and then I also have some friends that live down there, so we'll end up visiting them, and they'll just put us up at their house for a few days. And
Like the couch and whatnot,
yeah,
and make
exactly.
do
So
with that.
yeah, so when it comes down to it, really thing you only have to pay for is gas, food, and any little entertainment things you want to
Right.
do,
Right.
right?
I like
So you
that.
can do it on a budget.
Yeah.
I think not my first trip, but one of the trips that I did down to California, I went all the way to Bakersfield,
Hmm.
California, and back to here, and I think I did it on a budget of like 280 American dollars.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
that's under
and I was
500
gone for a
dollars.
week. Yeah, I was gone for a
That's
week too.
wild.
Yeah,
That's wild. So you mentioned camping. Now you also mentioned being in the city itself. How does it work? Is it do you then decide that okay, you know what, I'm just going to get a hotel if you're in a
yeah.
city?
Sometimes,
Okay.
sometimes I'll go into the city and I'll visit, and then I'll just bounce out of the city when we're all done checking out the sites, and we'll just find like the nearest sort of either rest stop. I've even actually just stopped in rest stops sometimes. If you're doing a long drive and you're trying to get somewhere, but there's nowhere to really
Right.
stop, I'll just pull over into a rest stop, sleep in the car.
That's interesting, man. I like that idea. What about shower and all that stuff that normal people do? Like how?
That's when you have to get like a campground that has those
Got it.
amenities,
Got
right?
it.
You know,
Okay.
because you can find some that have shower access and
Okay.
stuff like that. So you pay $20 or $40 for the night, right? And then you can go
And
use
you
the
can go and use the
showers.
shower. That's
Yeah.
wild,
So
man. But it
yeah,
would be crazy now though, because now it's like time of COVID. I'm sure a lot of those places are shut down, so it makes it
yeah.
very
It would be a lot more. I mean, right now it's difficult to travel at all. Like
right.
obviously the borders closed, can't go to the states right
Right.
now. I actually, because I couldn't go to the states, I was hoping this year I'd get to go to
Hmm.
PEI. I got a friend who lives out there, and I was just gonna fly to PEI, go visit him, and then it turns out that PEI is actually closed off.
Really?
Yeah, they only have three ways in, right? You can take the
Right.
bridge, you can take a ferry, or you can fly. So it's really easy for them to just say no. And if you're not a resident,
You
you're not
can't. You
coming
can't.
in.
You can't go in.
Yeah.
That's also
So
wild too. Then you also have to consider the part where you get there. Then you have to quarantine, which is mandatory, which
yeah,
I think is pretty crazy,
yeah,
especially and you're working, right? You're working right now. So if your work was to give you 2 weeks off and say, sure, go, but you need to be back in 10
yeah,
days or whatever, and you get to the city, it's not even feasible.
yeah. No, yeah, and like I'm pretty sure that if I had to do that, it wouldn't even be a paid 2 weeks off. It would just be 2 weeks of missing
Right,
work
pretty
kind of
much.
thing. You're just forced into it. So, but yeah, it's a good thing that like I had the friend out in PEI because I was literally calling him, being like, "Hey, I'm gonna come out and visit," and he told me that you can't. You have to be a resident to come in. Like you can't come here. And then I went on their site and I looked it up, and yeah, sure enough, it was all closed off.
That's crazy. That's
So,
wild. Uh,
so this summer has just been kind of hanging
yeah.
out.
So let's talk about clearly your mom and dad. Are they like still together?
They are,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, they've all been together my whole life. Rare couple, because most parents tend to split these days.
But how exciting it must be though. Like
Yeah, it was, I had a great childhood. I can't complain, honestly. Two really good parents. They're still great parents. Love them to death. And they'd give up the world, for
that's cool. How many siblings do you have?
two sisters, both older.
So you're the youngest in your family. I would you say that you're probably the most adventurous one, or
Um, I would definitely say that I'm a little bit more spontaneous in that. Like my sisters are very coordinated on their planning, and they want things
okay,
done a certain way. Whereas I'm kind of like my plan is to get in my car and go, and when
and
I get
go?
there, I'll figure out what I'm doing.
That's pretty cool, man. I'm glad we're having this conversation. So let's switch over and go to photography. Clearly, I started this thing because I wanted to be able to have conversation with just everybody and anybody. Photographers, non-photographers, videographers, actors,
Creators in general.
just creators in general, people with stories, with something to offer to the world that other people can benefit from. Because, we live in a world today where we're all just so tied into our own little corner or grew up with a certain group of people and we're not willing to step out of that or
it's
break
really
those
hard to get
barriers.
out of that comfort.
It's extremely hard, especially when you get really comfortable. Imagine having chicken and dinner every day and suddenly somebody is telling you, hey, you know what? You need to go across the street because over there they're having just burger. Maybe you don't want to have burger. You don't want to trade that kind of thing off. So I wanted to have this platform where we can all have this conversation. So what got you into photography in the first place?
Well, I think I'll kind of jump back to it was the travel thing, right? Like I started out by just, oh, my friends are never going to be able to come here, so I want to take some pictures and share my adventures, right? And then first one was Denver, and then the second one was San Francisco. And then after San Francisco, when I got back to Calgary, I just realized that I just enjoyed taking pictures of things. So I just started shooting Calgary and going around here. And I was just using my phone at the time too, just shooting with I think an LG or something at the time. And, it took pretty good photos. It had a couple different lenses on it. And that's sort of how I started it. And then, I wasn't even on Instagram to begin with. And then I finally got on Instagram. And it was actually Instagram that helped me network with more photographers and people around Calgary here. And actually, the day that you met, I was actually just out meeting a fellow photographer that I had only ever spoken to on Instagram.
On
we had never
Instagram.
actually officially met.
Right.
Like, hey, let's meet up.
Oh, that was Andy.
Yeah, Andy.
Andy.
in the
Okay.
YYC, yeah, so we were just kind of meeting up for the first time too, and
Oh, that's wild.
and I think at that point I had also finally gotten my DSLR, my Canon. So
Right,
I just
yes.
picked up my camera and it was like, okay,
Right.
now I'm learning a new camera, I'm meeting some new friends, finding some new vantage points in the city I've never been to. So it's just been like a constant experience and like growing and like learning as I go and learning from other people, just networking, meeting those photographers, going out, doing those collaborating, and they taught me a lot of things they know, and maybe I'd bring some light to things that they didn't quite know about, just
Right,
some tricks
right.
that I learned self-taught, right?
We always have a choice. At least I
That's
think
great. What would you say? What is your process? So let's say this is your location. What would be your process going into a photo shoot, having to capture this?
Well,
Because you do, by the way, I didn't even give you your accolades yet, but you do beautiful photos.
Yeah.
I see your work, from day one up to now this point, like it's just freaking incredible.
Thanks, man.
By the
Appreciate
way, so congratulations for that. And hopefully in the podcast we'll have audience with it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, really what I would do is I don't have my camera or set up on a tripod yet at this point. I'm just going to
Okay.
be carrying it around. And like I have the live screen, right? So I don't really use my viewfinder too much.
Gotcha.
I'm more so just on the live view. And I'll just sort of start walking around and sort of looking at the camera, seeing where my angles are and seeing what makes a good composition, Obviously, this is something that I had to learn over time because it used to be just like, oh, that's cool, click. Oh, that's cool.
Right,
click.
right.
But
Right.
now I spend more time, oh, I got to try this angle. And I look at it, no, that's not quite the right angle. So I'll adjust and I'll try something different, right? And I've learned now, to use up the picture space a little better, have some leading lines somewhere. So I try to find even like implied lines. There may not be actual physical walkway here to
Right,
follow.
right.
But
Mhm.
if you got like a row of streetlights, a row of streetlights can act as an implied line because you can see
Gotcha.
the depth in the photo. You got the bigger one and the smaller one. They get smaller and they create
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
implied line. So I sort of learned how to create depth or like a 3D feel in a
Mhm.
two-dimensional image, right? So that's usually what I do is I'll just sort of walk around and I'll end up taking hundreds of photos at one spot kind of thing. And I might get 10 that I really like out of it.
Mhm.
And sort of just go through the ones that I want, and then I'll also edit them and color correct and
Right.
fix them up because cameras can only do so much.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
don't see as good as our eyes.
No.
So when I see something, I'm like, oh, that's what I see, and I take a picture. I'm like, well, that's not what the camera sees. So
No.
what I try to do is correct the camera just to fill in the gaps that maybe I
Right.
couldn't figure out.
Now I know that some photographers, I haven't been able to do it just because you already seen like how many stuff that I have
Yeah,
with
a
me,
lot of equipment.
and I forget things all the time. So, and I do have one of those. What do you call those things? The color checkers. I think that's what they're called. Anyway, they come in a little case So you have the video portion, and you have the white balance, and you have
Okay.
right. Do you travel around with one of those as well, the white balance cards?
No, I've never
Okay.
actually seen one,
Ye-
so this is
oh,
new to
really?
me. Yeah.
I actually have one. They're expensive, by the way. So don't even waste
Don't
your
waste
time
your
with
time,
it.
eh?
Don't waste your time. Um, there are time and places where they're absolutely, call for if you have like a big client,
Yeah.
right? And because that big client, chances are they've probably worked with other professionals in the business. So, of course, you want to impress them with the
'Cause
gear.
they've
It's not
already
because you
seen-
need
yeah.
it, but they don't understand that you know what you're doing just by eyeballing it, right? So you want to have all these little perks
Just
around
to show them that you
because
are
that's why you're
professional.
charging them, right? You
Yeah,
see-
yeah, you're paying for my time, my equipment. You're basically renting my gear and everything as well, right?
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So actually, what I do for a lot of that color correcting and knowing where my exposure levels are at is on my camera. It has the histogram,
Got it.
and at first I didn't know how to use it or what it even meant, and then I finally started doing some research and looked up kind of.
We always have a choice. At least I think we
So yeah, so I just started using the histogram, learned out what it meant. So when I take my initial photo, I've got the histogram on my screen, and I make sure that I'm not overexposing or underexposing. I just want to make sure that my lighting is in the middle. And then once I get it into post processing, I use Lightroom, and Photoshop is new to me, but I have it. But I mostly use Lightroom, and then I'll bring in like the 3-color histogram. So it's got the red, blue, and green histogram. And that's when I kind of do my adjustments, and I try to make sure everything balances from the whites to the blacks, and like make sure there's a good even flow. It's basically a nice way to visualize, because every phone screen, every computer screen, everything you look at the photo on is different. They all have their different brightnesses, different settings, and you don't know if it looks good on my phone, is it really going to look good on your phone or on a computer screen. So the histogram, I find, actually just tells you what the image actually looks like. And so if you can keep it balanced in the histogram, it's going to look good on the.
Keep that thought in mind, and we will be right back after these commercials. We need a pick. Yeah, right. We're so big time right now, right? So
at least I think
you mentioned. I also want to go into the editing process as well, because I want people that are tuning in for the first time, and I think about getting a camera or whatnot, to know that okay, this is a place they can also come and get, photography tip as well. And there's something else you mentioned. I want to go back to that before, then we can fast forward to where we were. You talk about when you first started. When you first started, you were using your phone. See, I think this is so important because people don't understand. First and foremost, if you have the money, right? You mom and dad is going to give you like $20,000 or 15 grand. Sure, go ahead. Get yourself a red camera, right? But I remember, and I can relate to your experience. The only reason why I got into videography and photography was because my brother was an artist, and I actually made a song, and I wanted to shoot a video for it. And so I thought that maybe I could go around. I was in Windsor, Ontario at the time, so I thought I could go around and maybe hire somebody. But the prices were so high that I was frustrated. A friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you just go and get a camera?" I had no idea. I went on YouTube. YouTube told me just go buy this. It'll look like this, which is not even the case. So ultimately, I wound up getting a camera. But before I got the camera, the music video I shot on the iPhone 3G.
No kidding. The 3G.
The three, not yo, but it's still like one of the dopest music video
Yeah.
that I've shot to date. Like I love that music video just because,
Oh, it's crazy what you can do with just your phone. now,
right? And I was like back then. So I want people to understand, like you don't need the most expensive gear out there to get started. I think you just need the inspirations and the motivation to want to go through it. What do you think about that?
Oh, I definitely agree. Like, obviously, having a high-end camera would make the picture quality probably a little better, a little higher resolution. But if you've got an eye for it and you can visualize it, it really just comes down to you creating it. You can take a picture with your phone. Maybe your phone doesn't take the best pictures in the world, but that's why we have post-processing, right? If you do that editing, a lot of good photos come from an edit. If you see anywhere on Instagram, the photographers that you're following, all the famous big ones, they show you their before and their after. And when you see the before picture, it just looks like anybody's old
Oh,
photo.
of course, yeah.
You know, it's dark, it's got shadows, you can't
Absolutely,
see anything.
yeah.
And then they show you their edited
Right.
photo where they've brightened it up,
Right.
they've brought the colors out, right? And a lot of a good photo comes down to that editing process, I think, because like I was saying before, camera can only do so much. You know, it can't take a perfect quality photo that our eyes can see, you know, because we can balance the highlights with the shadows very well. But a camera doesn't, you know, you're either underexposing or you're overexposing. So what I've tended to do now that I've kind of learned that is that I will purposely underexpose my photos, because it's always better to try to recover the shadows than to blow out the highlights.
Gotcha.
If you blow out the highlights, there is no recovering them. You know, it goes straight to white, and that part of the image is now gone. You can't recover it. Whereas if you kind of underexpose just the touch, you can always, in post, add some exposure and bring up those shadows and still keep the colors of the sky.
Right, because you're also shooting always for the sky as well. Now,
Yeah.
some people might be now. Of course, this is a different technique when we get into portraiture and shooting people. By the
Yep.
way, I've
Oh, it's
seen
so
you shot some people like portraiture that you've
Yeah.
done. How do you find that experience?
It's definitely more of a challenge for
Yeah.
me. Not so much that I'm introverted or anything. I love dealing with people. You know, I talk to people all the time. But whenever I'm out doing photography, doing landscapes, I'm usually just sort of in my own zone.
I got it.
I'm like, I got this, and I'm sort of focused on that. When you throw a model into the mix, it immediately is like, okay, now I got somebody else to worry about, and I got to make sure that he's doing what I need them to
Right.
do. You know, I got to position them, make sure, because like they can't see what I'm doing on the camera side.
Right.
So I got to make sure that they're sitting in the right spot. I'll move a little to the left, move a little to the right. You know, turn your head this way. You know, it's a lot of learning for me because it took me a long time to figure that out. You know, at first it was just like, okay, stand there. I don't know what to tell you. Click, click. And then I started kind of learning, okay, what do other photographers do in their portraits? You know, how do they pose the model? Which position do you put them in? Where do you put them in the image or in the picture frame, right? So many different techniques. And then I got a different lens, and I think a lot of it comes down to a lens as well. You know, having that shallow depth of
Right.
field for portraiture is almost essential,
Right.
because like it's got nice clear focus on the subject, and then you can blur out the background or the foreground, or you know, you can add that depth that way. Whereas when it comes to what I do normally, landscape photography or nighttime sort of long exposures, it's more of a I want the full range. You know, I want everything from close to far away focus. So I'm using a very very tight aperture, you know, f18, f20 kind of thing. But with the portraits, you know, f2, f2.5,
Yeah.
somewhere in that range, right?
We always have a choice. At least I think we
So I started doing something recently, which I think is super crazy, but I like it. I like it a lot. In fact, I like it so much. So typically, you do this type of settings when you're doing when you're say shooting for sports or fast moving athletes and whatnot. But I started to really kick up that shutter. Like I would kick up that shutter and I would keep it at like 1 point, the lowest I can keep it at f1.2 or 1.8 or whatever it is. And I would just kick up the shutter to up to like sometime even like 1,000 or like 2,000. I shot like 2,000 before, but I feel like I also do that with video as well. People don't realize. So when you start to see those like really milky video quality, it does take a longer time to edit. But at the end of the day, just because you put in that little extra thing, people don't realize it, and they're wondering why does your video look so much different than my video, right? So there's all these little nuances and techniques that you can.
Oh yeah, there's so many little tricks.
So many,
and,
too
like,
many.
Again, you don't need a high-end camera.
You
to do
don't.
those things. A lot of the camera that I use right now is like a mid to entry
Right.
level camera. It's very lower
Right.
end, right? And I think that it takes good enough photos that you know they're print
Right.
worthy. You know, you can blow them up. They're huge.
Right.
Like they got good resolution. You don't lose quality when they get bigger. So,
That's awesome.
You know, as long as you're taking a good shot, and you can make any camera really do what.
No, you're absolutely right. So now let's go to the editing software. So editing software, what do you use to edit?
Mostly
Lightroom.
That's my go-to. There's a couple times where I'll use like Adobe Photoshop or like blending so I can do composite or layer a couple photos together. I'm still pretty new at that. I'm more of like a single exposure kind of guy. I take one frame, one shot, that is my
Gotcha.
image. But I have tried to blend, you know, stars into a black sky before, things like that. and then just a little bit of Snapseed, because Snapseed has just these couple little
Mhm.
filters that I use at the end after I've edited it in Lightroom. Then I'll bring it into Snapseed and just apply these last couple little filters that maybe Lightroom doesn't have to offer.
Isn't it
You know?
crazy how
Yeah.
many steps? People don't realize this. When a
Yeah.
client hires you, they think you're just there to take a picture.
Mm-hmm.
How hard could it be?
Yeah. Oh, it's easy, right? You just go there and click a shutter,
Right.
right? No, yeah, there's definitely so much more to it too. That's why usually when I'm like dealing with a portrait shoot, you know, and I have a client, right, I charge per the hour for both shooting and editing.
Gotcha.
So my time includes my editing. If it's like if you just want photos straight out of the camera, I'll just give you the photo straight out of the camera. That's fine. But if you want those high quality looking nice photos that are color balanced and you want me to do my editing, there's an extra charge, you know, for editing.
And how do
as
you
well, right?
gauge your fees on?
Basically, like I said, it's just like an hourly thing. I do $50 an hour for both shooting and editing. My basic photo package, if you wanted, say, 5 to 10 images edited and a 1 hour shooting, would be about $100, right? That'd be $50 for the hour of shooting, $50 for an hour of editing, kind of thing. So that's where I start, and then I go up from there if you want additional images or if you want to shoot at multiple locations, if there's travel time involved, you know, things like that start adding up. I've actually done a couple works for clientele using my drone too. So like they actually wanted some aerial shots of their project they were working on, so I went and flew the drone around, got them their aerial shots, and you know they paid for that because you can't really fly around the area. You know, you can't just go up in a helicopter whenever you
No,
want.
no,
so-
no. Nobody does that anymore. And who has that kind of money?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, companies do.
Right.
I don't. So drones
Yeah,
work
I
perfectly. Right? So you edit in Lightroom. And I've always struggled with Lightroom editing. I was telling a friend of mine just the other day, just last night actually, I was telling a friend of mine how much of a struggle it is for me to edit with Lightroom. I think when I started initially editing, I learned how to edit on Photoshop. And because it gave you this control,
Photoshop is very powerful.
and it gives you
Very
all these control. I mean, it takes forever to freaking edit and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, it gives you all this control, and at the end of the day, you're still satisfied with what you can come out
Oh yeah.
with that.
I mean, if I knew Photoshop better, I probably would have gone there. It was just easier for me to start with Lightroom, you know, just get that one app that I needed. It's good on the phone and the computer, so I actually do a lot of my editing right on my phone. Except for the ones where I really got to get some fine detail and it's hard to zoom in on your phone and get those smaller details, then maybe I'll edit that on the computer. But most of my editing, I just take them straight off my camera, put them into my online cloud, get them up on my phone, and then just start
And
editing
just do
right
it
on my
from there.
phone. Yeah.
Dude, that's
so
pretty
I can
awesome.
do it on the road while I'm out doing my travels. I can upload photos that are edited, fully ready to go while I'm out.
Yeah, yeah. I've started to get into that little recently now, and I started to sort of minimize, and also to the workload as well. You're looking at time. Time is money. So I've started to like actually bring myself to saying, okay, you don't need to spend all that time, you know. And even just doing it with Lightroom, where you're able to, one of the feature that they have in Lightroom, which I wish Photoshop has it, but it's not as simple, right? Where you're able to do that. You edit one image, you put the effects on the rest of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can just sort of save it as a preset and just sort of load it onto all the photos that you took at the same location, same lighting. That way, you know, the edits will apply to both.
Awesome. So, what are you looking forward to now? This podcast is coming to an end now. What are you looking forward to?
We always have a choice. Or at least I think we
Just going forward in general. I mean, I'm looking forward to hopefully getting back to some sort of sense of normality, being able to travel again. I definitely am missing that. You know, I had the travel bug last 5 years in a row. I've done an annual trip somewhere. You know, I've gone to California 2 or 3 times, Denver, Minneapolis, all the way across Canada to PEI and back. And this year I've just been sort of stuck. And it's definitely starting to weigh on me. It's just like with all the things going on in the world and trying to keep working, it's just getting really stressful and mentally exhausting. And I just need a break.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking forward to a break.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Actually, I plan to go to Ivory Coast in December. I'm hoping that I know that the borders are closed right now, but there's rumor that they might be open come the 29th of next month. So I'm hoping they open up fairly soon because I do want to go to Ivory Coast in December because I mean I haven't been home since I left, right? So it's going to be a complete culture shock, and of course I want to be able to still do this podcast. I'm not sure if I will have like a two camera setup, but I think that even just having a one camera setup because the podcast itself is video and audio, which you went on YouTube and you see in the video version there. And I want to do it because the thing is that a lot of radios from like way back in the days, you don't hear about them anymore. But if those radio shows had cameras, then those video clips would be somewhere,
They'd still be
right?
out there circulating.
And this is
yeah.
going to live on forever. So I want to make sure. Yeah, but I am looking forward to that. What has been your method really surviving this COVID thing? Like,
Well, I mean, my social cohort's already kind of small. You know, I just have my select group of friends that I hang out with, so I've just sort of limited it to continuing that sort of trend. Obviously, not traveling, not going down to the States right now. It seems like it's a little crazy down there right now. So, probably just better off put that off for a little while. Um, I've been reading a lot of books, you know, whenever I have the time. In the winter time, anyways. If it's nice outside, I'm outside. You know, I basically this whole summer I've been doing a lot of gardening, you know, growing some fruits and vegetables, trying to make some harvests, right? And then just whenever the weather is bad, go inside, read a book, do a puzzle, you know, just find something to kill the
what have you
time.
read recently that's exciting?
Well, I've been reading this 10-part series actually, written by of all people L. Ron Hubbard.
No way.
Yeah. It, it's not like a Scientology book or anything. It's one of his fiction works.
Okay.
But it's basically about an
Interesting.
alien race, but it's written from the point of view of the aliens. And yeah, it's a
I'm
whole
sorry, I'm
thing. It's
laughing,
quite an
yeah.
adventure. It's actually quite
Okay.
humorous too. It's a lot of satire. You know, he makes fun of people. It's written back in the 80s.
Okay.
But the weird thing is that as I'm reading his books, a lot of the things that he was complaining about back then still apply today.
Right.
And it's like, wow, he was thinking the same thing that we are 40 years ago.
Right.
You know, so a lot of things, even though they've changed a lot in technology and stuff like that, a lot of the world issues are still the same.
Yeah, they haven't changed very much, have they?
Yeah.
Which take me back to one of my favorite books, 1984, which was written in by George Orwell. We're just going to finish our thought and wrap this up. So that was written in the 50s, 50s and 40s by George Orwell, talking about come the year 1984, you will
Right,
have.
he was talking about the
He was
future
talking
at
about the
that point.
future. You know, you will have Big Brothers watching. Now it's even crazier. We've
Yeah.
gone past Big Brother now. We have GPS system that's tracking us
Oh,
everywhere
yeah.
we go.
It's actually funny you
wild.
mention that because, yeah, this series that I'm reading, written in the 80s, is actually based in the future. And he doesn't actually put a year on it. There's no number, but if you kind of gauge what he's saying through
Right.
context, I think the book is almost based right around now, 2020, 2030.
Wow.
Somewhere in that range is where he was writing about. And his idea was that we've already overpopulated, we've polluted the atmosphere. You know, his vision of Earth is that we were going south
Right.
real quick.
And we're there now. We're
So-
living it.
So he was wrong about a few things, but you know he was on the right track for a few things as well. You know?
Awesome. Well, tell the people, we got to wrap this up. Tell the people where they can find you real quick, and I'll come in with my closing.
You can find me on Instagram, Mikey Travels. That's 2 underscores between Mikey Travels. I'm also Mikey Beats and Mikey Boards. Mikey Beats is my music page. We didn't really get into music today, but I do also make music. And Mikey Boards is my snowboard page. So Instagram, and then if you're on Facebook, Mikey B Photography, and the True Paradox Productions. That's my music.
That's pretty awesome, man. Yeah, that was definitely. I'll also have the handles and whatnot where they can find you of the things. Look, I want to thank you so much for being here. Another episode of 18th Avenue Podcast. So, guys, if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Instagram as well at 18th Avenue Podcast. That's the handle will be there. All this information will be there. And be sure to listen to us on Spotify, Anchor Podcast, Google Podcast. You know, this is a new platform, and we just want to be able to connect with our friends and bring in people that have interesting stories that they want to share with the rest of the world. And we hope that this does something to your life. And if it does, please give us a thumbs up. and we are out of here.
We always have a choice. Or at least I think we do. We can always use our voice. We thought this to be true.
Follow up with him, and you want to say something?
Yeah. No, I don't got anything.